Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Cose WebEd webinar. Today's topic is Ask a Video Producer, Pro Tips for Great Productions. It's going to be presented by Chris Carell from Cinecraft Productions. Before we get started though, I want to take a few minutes to go over a couple of housekeeping items. My name is Sean. I'm the webinar organizer for today. We want to make sure today's presentation is as valuable and helpful for you as possible. So we're going to ask you to submit questions using the question button that you see in your control panel, and we're going to take a couple of opportunities throughout Chris's presentation today to solicit questions. So no need to wait until the end to ask those questions. We'll be handling them as we go through, and I'll be collecting those submitted questions and be doing the Q&A with Chris. And now for the main event, I want to introduce Chris Carell. He is the VP of Programming for the American Marketing Association of Northeast Ohio, a role in which he helps plan the many events the chapter hosts each year. He's the creative director at Cinecraft Productions, Cleveland's longest-standing video and e-learning production house. As a master teacher and award-winning scriptwriter and producer, he's passionate about using stories to teach skills, motivate purchases, create awareness, and invoke thought to change behaviors. He's also probably the tallest guy in the room, but in more of a Buddy the Elf kind of way. His passion for having fun while creating meaningful relationships makes him a natural fit for the AMA, NEO, and Cinecraft. Named the unofficial mayor of Lakewood, Chris loves his hometown. He's a father, spouse, coach, chef, sports honk, Star Wars geek, and loves most games played with a racket. Smiling is his favorite. Now, Chris, I am going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Sean. I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity. I want to take a moment to thank yourself, Sean, as well as Adina at Cose for your help in facilitating today's session. And throw a quick shout out to Trudy and Ashley, who I believe are online here. Got a little text from a friend saying that you'd be listening in on today's session. So without further ado, let's talk video. So, as Sean explained, I work at Cinecraft Productions right now, and we are a nationally recognized custom content learning solutions company. Our goal is to always try to bring the audience or the learner as close to the intended skills as possible. And our goal is always to improve the performance and maximize our customers' business results. So everything that I'm going to talk about as it relates to video here and everything we do is about trying to improve performance for companies as well as maximizing their results. So we make cool stuff, basically, is what it is. Technically, it's custom content, blended solutions, ILT, VILT, e-learning simulations, games, and that kind of thing. And our competitive distinction, as we've been around for over 75 years, is video. So in today's webinar, we're going to cover three separate parts to this presentation. We're going to get into the four-step production process, and then I'm going to offer a lot of pro tips that'll help your productions, and then we'll finish with a live Q&A that's going to give you an opportunity to dive into and personalize your particular needs. All links are going to be available in a slide at the end, and then they'll be available along with this deck in the Cose servers in a couple weeks, is what Sean and Adina has shared with me. So let's hop into the four-step production process. So I like to think of the production process as four steps. Most people will say that it's pre-production, production, and post-production. However, before that ever even happens, before you start to make anything or conceive it, there's some work that you should really do ahead of time. So again, as I said early on, if you have questions as we go along, please chat them into the chat box, and we'll try to tackle them as we get going. So how many of you have ever written a creative brief? Let's see if we get anybody who's had any experience. A quick poll, yes or no. Have you ever written a creative brief?
Looks like it's pretty split, Chris, so far, about 50-50.
All right, so for those of you who have not had experience, or even those of you have, these are the questions that I've identified as kind of the best ways to work yourself through a creative brief process. It's really the document that's going to summarize your project's business need and explain how the video will address that need. It should have answers to all of these questions, and if you don't answer some of these questions, it could lead you astray down the path. So it answers some kind of typical things when you're creating something that's reaching an audience in terms of who that audience is and what the solution is, and then working your way through the call to action and try to figure out what your budget's going to be, where you're going to distribute it. Are you going to do it on social, or will it just be on your website? And then ultimately you're going to end in a spot where you have a list of tasks that need to be completed. So who's going to do those particular tasks? So getting that brief established early on is pretty critical before you even get into trying to decide what type of video. So let's move into that. So really the type of video that you're going to use is tough if you don't know what kind of video will have the result you're looking for. So what I did is I came up with these 12 most common types that Cinecraft Productions has made over the years, and sort of made this list with the idea being if we're being asked to make these videos for customers, then you, the person who is either a small business owner or works for a company that needs to make video, could see, okay, these are the trends and what's going on. So of these 12 types, there are some that are more common than others. Different safety, recruitment videos, product explainers, fundraisers, talking heads, and here's that list of 12. And so I'd like to ask you what you think is the most in demand. So if you had to pick one of this list of 12, which one do you think is the most in demand? And chat me your response, and then Sean, you let me know.
I'll collect these responses for you, Chris. So far we've got one response, one person saying more marketing social. That's what we have so far.
Okay.
And I think that's what we have so far, marketing social.
Okay, perfect. So based upon our experience here, these 4 types right here tend to be the most in demand. When people contact us or we talk to people about the kind of video they're making for their business, for their company, testimonial tends to be the big driver right now. I think we can thank e-commerce and Amazon for that. The testimonial really helps serve a lot of purposes in the business situation. And then obviously how-to videos that teach people how to do things, explainers that explain concepts and processes, or maybe even how you're supposed to carry out something or how a business would help you carry out a particular task. And then of course the marketing social one. Whoever chatted the marketing social, you nailed it for sure. There's a lot of demand for social video delivered on a variety of channels. I guess the best question for you to identify when you go through those 12 types is figuring out which one you need for your business. All right, after you figured out what type of video you have your creative brief ready to go, or sorry, which type of video you want to use, then you're going to want to identify the roles that people are going to play in your productions. And to help people understand those production roles, the names of the different roles that people play, I created this roles and rates guide. And this kind of really applies to Cleveland in a regional way. And so in this guide that I have listed out the title, the formal title on the left, and what they do, and then which part of the production process they fit in, and a couple of names, aliases. And then there's a rate chart over there that really helps you if you're trying to decide, okay, I want to make X number of videos, or I want to make this type of video, and I'm going to need these type of people to help make it happen. So if you are the person at your company who's trying to forecast how much this video could cost, you can kind of use this rate guide as a way to determine potentially how much it'll cost. Of course, you can use this to compare once you talk to a vendor as well to see whether or not they're under budget, on budget, or over. It'll also kind of help get the language of the land when it comes to dealing with the production process as well. Okay, moving on to the phases of production. So this is typically what people talk about when they talk about the production process. So you have your creative brief, you know what kind of video you're going to make, and you've identified the different roles that people are going to play on your team. And now you're ready to start talking about the 3 phases, right? So this is pre-production, obviously being stuff that happens before you start to create any kind of content. So this is the planning, the script writing, the location scouting, anything that happens before you roll a camera or take a picture or create an asset. Next stage, or phase, I'm sorry, is production. And that's work that results in a physical creation of content or assets. So this is rolling the camera, recording that video, taking a photo, or having some type of graphic designer create an animation for you that'll get used during post-production, which is where you actually assemble that content into that deliverable and put it in a form that can be uploaded to the internet or broadcast and shown at a live event. So for each phase of the production, what I put together was a checklist These checklists were really helpful to me when I started to make video, to be able to understand the linear process that I should be using in order to not only create a great piece of content, but also make sure that I'm crossing all my T's and dotting all my I's. So having this on hand as you get started, if you're new to video altogether, and you are trying to make sure you're doing everything you need to be successful, looking at a checklist like a pre-production checklist is going to help you make sure that you're able to accomplish what you want to accomplish. There's a lot of moving pieces and a variety of personalities on each job when you go to create a video, and some of these I'm going to hop into a little bit later in pro tips. And of course, this checklist, along with anything you see here, will be available in a link at the end of the presentation. Some things to look at when you get into the production checklist. I always like to start with showing up early and prepared, so you've got everything planned out during the pre-production phase, and then you want to make sure you show up and that you're ready and on time when anybody else who's going to be there at the company or the business or location that you're making this happen, and that you respect that location. So we always try to leave everything exactly the way it is when we arrived. And then a couple other things I'm going to hop into a little bit later, the makeup kit, and then collaborating with your DP. I get a lot of questions about that. That's really spending some time with the person who's going to run the camera for you. Make sure you work out like how the lighting is going to work and the audio is going to get gathered. And then that will help you stay on schedule throughout the day. And we're going to talk about a few of those in a second. And then make sure you're recording. That seems like a really obvious one in number 9. There's no doubt. In number 9, it says, you want to make sure that the red light is on. It's not uncommon to spend a lot of time getting everything exactly the way you want it, and then you're rolling and realize you're not rolling, and the red light's not on, and you're not actually recording anything. And then mark up the script, check out the shot list. Of course, we're going to talk about those in a few minutes. And then when you're done with production, so let's say you're done capturing your video or shooting your photos, you should have all of your assets backed up into 2 or 3 locations. And then of course your script should be marked up with any kind of edited copy on it. And then on logos or photos, anything you're going to use to make the video, are all gathered into one place. When you get to post-production, which is actually assembling and putting everything together, this is another stage of planning that you want to spend with your editor. You want to use a workflow to cut down on surprises. You know, this is trying to make sure that the script and the shot, the music, the assets, the timeline, go over that with the person who's going to make your video. And then a tip here that I toss in, I'm going to jump down a little bit into here, is the Vimeo's review page. So Vimeo is a website out there that mostly caters to independent filmmakers. It's similar to YouTube in that it has custom content that people have created and uploaded. There's not a lot of advertising here the way there is in YouTube, but what's really nice is they have this platform that allows you to upload and use what's called a review page. We have started to use this here quite a bit professionally for us here at Cinecraft, because it allows us to collaborate not only with the person who is producing or directing the video and the editor, but also the customer or the client. So for you, if you're thinking about making a video, or you're having people involved, using this review page allows you to do something pretty fantastic. And I'm just going to sort of show it to you here really quick. This little blue dot you see is a comment. So let's say somebody was reviewing this and they decided they want to have more content from this video that involves this young lady walking, it looks like, on a beach. So you click on the screen, add your comment, click add, and it ends up over here on the side in a list of comments that can be clicked on, executed, responded to. The beautiful part about that is the time code. Before this review page sort of existed for Vimeo, we would, even professionally as well as a freelancer before I came to Cinecraft, you'd have to get comments from people about what they want to change in the video. So that's a very lengthy process. Either we bring people in, spend a couple hours with them in person, or they send you like a spreadsheet or an email that says change. Let's say somebody sent you the comment that said, change the young lady walking on the beach. Well, that young lady might be walking on the beach at 21 seconds into the video. It might be at 5 seconds into the video. It might be at 1 minute and 15 seconds into the video. So if you get a comment that says, change the young lady walking on the beach, you don't know which one it is. So the beauty of the Vimeo review page is it puts that little blue dot, it puts the comment exactly where the commenter wants the change to happen. And it really clears up confusion and allows people to exactly work on what they need to do. It saves a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of frustration. All right, so next section we're going to hop into is a stream of pro tips. These are going to cover some of the topics that I've touched on already from the 4 phases of production, and I thought this might be a good place to check in and see if anybody has any questions at this point. Sean, I'll give you about a minute to see if anyone chats one at you, and then you can.
Sure, Chris. Well, while people are getting their questions together, I guess one question that I would ask you is, you obviously you went through a lot of steps there. Is there any one step in that process that you see people kind of struggle with the most? Is there anything that kind of trips people up the most as they're kind of going through this kind of pre-production process?
That's a good question, Sean. So I would say probably the greatest error that most people make, especially if you're making video for the first time for your business, whether you're creating it yourself or you're hiring somebody, is that stuff that happens before pre-production, right? So that's that creative brief, understanding the phases of production, and identifying the roles that people are going to play. It's very common for people to sort of jump in and say, I need a video, I need a testimonial, or I need a marketing video to put on Facebook, and then we often end up asking the questions that help make a creative brief, which it's not a problem, because writing that creative brief has to happen at some point in time for the work to be successful. But I'd say what happens more often than not is people want to jump right in and start rolling, especially since most everybody has a pretty decent camera in their pocket in the form of a cell phone, so you're used to pulling out the camera and making video right away. However, for a business purpose, identifying those key things like the results, like what are you trying to do with this video? Who are you trying to reach? What's the call to action? Why are you creating it? And then what do you hope to get out of it in the end? Like those types of questions really need to be answered before you start to make anything, so that you understand where you're going to distribute it and how it's going to take place. Okay. Any other questions? Press on.
There is. We do have one other question.
Okay.
What recommendations would you have if you're looking to create social content for a social platform?
So that's a broad question. Let me take it this way. So I think the pre-planning stage of video helps you set up what you're going to do with content in a social standpoint. So determining that end result purpose. So let's say you're going to make a video that's a minute long, and for social, you want to maybe chop it into a 15 and a 30. So if you didn't plan ahead to say, okay, we're going to design this so we can chop it into a 15-second clip, a 30-second clip, and then we'll have the 60-second 1-minute clip, then you have this video that maybe doesn't really work. Maybe the first 15 seconds, there's not a whole lot of excitement there. And so now you want to shorten it to kind of maybe throw it out on Twitter or even on Instagram or something like that. And the short piece isn't very exciting. So you have to either rework it, replan it. So I would say from a social standpoint, identifying how you're going to use it before you start creating anything will know what form it needs to be in before you get going. And it's very common. I mean, a lot of the animation work we do now is designed to be segmented into smaller forms. All right, so let's go behind the scenes and take a look at a little video clip. Given our time frame today, I'm going to focus on one single shot from one project that we did here, and sort of break down some of the elements that go into making that success. So let's jump into it. So here you see what's called an authentic simulation. This is something we do incredibly well here at Cinecraft. It's one of our fortes, and I'm going to bring up the actual simulation and show you the finished video clip in its place. Let's do that. There won't be audio for this, so I'm going to sort of talk you through it. So we see an actor enters from the left. They're going to walk towards the camera, hit their mark, pause, and allow the person who's watching this to be able to make a decision. So right now what you can't hear is there is a narrator that's coming on talking about, you are in step S of the start the conversation. You notice a customer walk into the store. How do you start the conversation? And you're presented with 3 answer choices. So as a video simulation, what this little video clip is doing is giving us an opportunity to create an authentic situation for retail sales personnel at Ace Hardware. This is based on a set of behaviors that's going to provide the customer with the most beneficial interaction with the customer service person there, so that they can learn how to do their job the best. So in this case, we have the the learner's watching the customer in the video, played by Diane, who's our actress there, and then they're presented with these choices that they have to react to. And each of those choices links out to another video clip, which we're not going to dive into today. However, what this does is kind of gives them a contrived experience so that learner, the audience member on the other side of this video, can demonstrate the behaviors they need before they get out on the sales floor. So it's a really helpful training tool. All right, so let's get into that now. What's that going to do from a video standpoint? So let's hop into the script. In order to have that video clip that you saw there, before we even get there, we need to write a script to get her out into that sales floor. And this little segment of the script you're looking at has a list of it, plausible learner right and wrong answers. So this is things that we sought from our subject matter experts to determine exactly what the sales rep should say, and then some answers that would be something they might say, or it's very common, but they're the wrong answers. And then we also get realistic customer dialogue, which you see pointed out there, which, how would a customer react to them? So it sort of feels real and authentic to them. In order to get that dialogue and get those answers that we need to have in the simulation, we use what's called a scenario grid. This helps us get that realistic story and prompt that. We use this little tool here to prompt the subject matter expert with questions. And the most important part is getting those plausible wrong answers, because if it's too easy, then everybody knows they just click the longest one or the shortest one, and we move on. So if you see here, this is just a quick side note for those of you who have learning experiences in your background or might be doing in the future. This is color coded, so we have a green answer, which is that perfect path. The red's the wrong answer. And the yellow is sort of something that maybe somebody would say, hey, hi, welcome to Ace Hardware. Can I help you? Well, that's a closed-ended question that's shutting people down. Instead, we want an open-ended answer, which is what can I help you find today, which is the correct answer and the green answer. And you see that realistic customer dialogue, each of those video clips gives you an example of what that person would look like in real life. And it's really helpful for those sales floor folks. A little more detail about script writing. If you are writing scripts yourself or reviewing them, we like to put the actor in all caps. So in this case, it's browser, not Diane, who's the actor's name here. And then any type of action that the actor will be conducting on camera is in a parenthetical. So we sort of put it in parentheses, and then that way we can use that to communicate to the actor in script form, as well as the director can use that on the day of the shoot to sort of help walk through each scene. So one of the things I suggest when you're doing this kind of stuff from a script writing standpoint is to practice it out loud with a colleague. It's very common in our world in making business video, regardless of the size of the company we work with, to have people write a first draft of the script. And what we see quite often is people write a script and I'll get it as a script writer and look at it and I'm like, I don't think they read this out loud. Because if I practice out loud with one of my colleagues down the hall, like, it doesn't make any sense. So I would suggest take that script, write it, and then role play it out loud with somebody. It might seem odd, especially if you're not a theatrical person, but I'd try it, because the results will give you a whole different set of situations that maybe you didn't plan on, and you'll know what to tweak right away. Next piece in here is actor direction, which I mentioned about having parenthetical. I like to describe what the actor do in the camera, make it look as authentic as possible. So even if you want them to smile or shake their head or walk off camera, make sure you indicate that in a parentheses. It'll help that person on camera feel more real and less like it doesn't belong in the situation. And of course, I always run this dialogue and all this actor direction with the client or the customer, whoever it is, on the day of the shoot to make sure it feels realistic. The next piece to hop into is production notes, and these are called a lot of different things. We call them production notes here because we usually put them ahead of a script or off to the far right on a column, and it sort of has some key detail that is critical in setting up each scene. So in that scene where you saw the woman walk into the Ace Hardware store and stop in her mark, we had to have the setting. So it was a weed killer lawn care aisle of an Ace store is the setting. What props we needed. Oftentimes, this is another rookie mistake for people who are making video in a complex situation. They forget some of the props they need. Like, go out, scout the location, like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this, that, and the other thing. And then you show up and like, oh, she's supposed to have a purse, because if she doesn't have a purse, how's she gonna go into it to pull something out, which she needs for her flyer, right? So having a list of props ahead of time, having it all planned, listed in your script is gonna be super helpful for you. And then some demographic data about your actor. In this situation, Diane, the actress we used for this, who was kind of middle-aged female, 40 to 55, she fit the type perfectly that they're looking for. This is the typical customer target for them. Happy and outgoing, but then the detail there is for the talent agency, yet capable of quickly showing unhappiness. We need to be able to have her show discontent if the sales personnel doesn't offer the right comment. So that's it for script writing. Let's get into location scouting next. So if you're going to go scout a location, I have this guide. Of course, I will show you the link to the, or I'm sorry, there will be a link at the very, very end. There's actually 8 steps for my scouting locations guide. But the kind of the pivotal 3 that are worth talking about today, or diving in a little bit deeper today, is quiet space. All right. So whether you are a DIYer or you're using a vendor, you want to scout that location and look to see, is it quiet? And when I say quiet, not just quiet to your own ear, it needs to be even quieter than that. And the reason why is if you're going to use a professional microphone, you're going to pick up sounds like a sound of an air handling system, like an HVAC or a heater blowing. Maybe there's a hum from lights overhead. Can you turn them off? You need to find out or not. And then how close are you to an outside wall that you might pick up some sounds from traffic or emergency vehicles or something like that. Next thing to kind of think about are the windows. If you're using windows for natural light, then you have to figure out where they're at so you can put your subjects so you have the window light coming onto the person's face or off to the side of them. And if you're not going to use windows, or you don't have the option of that for lighting, then you have to use electric lights. Then where's your access to electricity? So knowing where you can get to electricity to plug in on the day of is super critical to lay out. And then the last thing I always tell people is to secure permissions. If you're going to shoot inside of some kind of building, or even if it's in your own building that has some kind of security access, make sure you have the ability to get where you need to go on the day of the shoot, so that when you show up with all of your people and everyone's ready to go for time, and you're locked out of a room, or you looked at it at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, now you're there at 6:30 and no one shows up till 9. Well, securing those permissions and understanding that stuff ahead of time, super critical. Of course, that location scouting pro guide will be in a link at the end. Next is a makeup kit. So your makeup kit should be able to handle 3 of the most common issues that happens on a video shoot. So that is shiny skin, frizzy hair, and hand close-ups. And so the kit you see in the picture there is the actual kit we use here at Cinecraft. It is not a makeup kit for like a professional makeup artist, where if we have a larger shoot that deals with a lot of actors, their kit would not look anything like this. It's probably 5 to 6 times the size of it. But this is perfect for us who may have to handle some small makeup issues just using our own crew to do that. And it could be perfect for you if you're a DIYer or if you're making video for your company. You want to be able to handle these kind of common things. So for shiny skin, we have like some oil absorbing sheets in there, kind of an oil mattifier and some matte face powders, maybe some cosmetic wedges. And then, you know, to handle frizzy hair, just some hairspray, maybe a couple different types of combs or some bobby pins. Really common issue we see in HD video is some wild flying hair wisps that in normal light, you don't even notice. As soon as we put that HD camera on, light up the lights, all of a sudden these hairs are shooting out. And so we want to be able to control that so everybody looks the best on camera. And then of course in hand close-ups, having a pair of nail trimmers and some neutral nail polish and maybe even a file or 2 in there really goes a long way if you have to do close-ups on a product or manipulating something with hands and you didn't even realize, oh, that person has a hangnail and I didn't even know it. But once I put an HD camera and extreme close-up, I'm like, whoa, don't know if we want to see that. So we have to make sure we have tools on hand to be able to make that happen. So let's see, I'm going to take a pause here and see if there are any questions, Sean, before I jump into the next group of tips here. See if there are any questions related to that content.
No questions yet, Chris, but one thing that kind of stuck out to me, you talked a lot about writing dialogue. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that most of the people listening probably haven't been in that situation before, and you talked about wanting it to sound natural. Any quick tips as we wait for the questions to come in on how to write natural sounding dialogue? Obviously, you mentioned talking to, rehearsing it with someone to kind of run through. Anything else that you might suggest as you kind of said about the practice of actually writing that script?
Sure. So Of course, this depends. I think to answer that question completely depends on your business case, right? So in my situation that I demonstrated here, we had a salesperson who's talking to a browser customer. So in order to get the dialogue that works really, that is the most natural and authentic to the situation, I would spend the time as the person who's helping write the script with the people who do that job the most, or who supervise people that doing the job the most. So I can ask them, so how would a person respond in this situation? And typically those are the folks who are your subject matter experts, your SMEs, who are going to be able to say, oh, if it's a browser customer, like they're just coming in the store and they're not really going to buy, they're just kind of looking, they have some time, maybe they're shopping for something, they would probably say, oh, I'm good, or thanks, or they'll give you those words that they have heard over and over and over again in the years of experience. So you kind of get like that sort of resource that sort of lived the life of that person who you're trying to generate the dialogue. Very much like scriptwriters do for narrative or theatrical pieces that go into a theater. They'll spend time, like really well done scripts. People spend the time with someone who either actually played that role in real life if they're depicting that, or somebody who fits that character in real life, so you can try to emulate or model that type of dialogue behavior. So I'd say getting that subject matter expert, that person who's done it before, and running it by them is key. And then after you get it down on paper, practicing it with somebody out loud, and then talking to the person who's a subject matter expert. Would they say this? How would that go down? Would they say, oh, I'm fine, I'm just looking? Or would they be just like, and walk away? So determining that with somebody and having a couple of checkpoints is super critical to having realistic dialogue.
Great, thanks, Chris. We actually have one other question that came in kind of along those same lines. What recommendations would you have for someone who maybe they're not terribly comfortable on camera? Say you're doing a testimonial and they're very nervous, they're very kind of stiff. How would you go about getting that testimonial to sound a little more natural?
That's an excellent question, and it's something that comes up quite a bit. It's incredibly common, in fact. Most people who I talk to when I'm producing the shoot and they're going on camera have never been on camera before. In fact, it's more rare for me to find somebody who has done something on camera than they haven't. So how I handle that situation is I've tried to build that relationship ahead of time. So if I can reach out to that person who's going to go on camera a day or 2 days or a week in advance and talk to them on the phone or meet them in person, then I do it. Now that's a luxury. You don't always have that opportunity. You know, sometimes you're charged in a business to go out and shoot some testimonials with some people and then go, right? You don't have an opportunity to even know who those people are before you show up. But if you can, try to reach out to them ahead of time, establish a rapport, get to know them a little bit. That sets them at ease. And then when you're going to record them, right? So then you're there to make that relationship. I always start right out of the gate. Hi, how are you? My name's Chris. I make a personal connection with them, find out where they live, get to know a little bit about them, as opposed to just flipping on the camera and going like, you know, news gathering situation and try to get them to say the perfect thing. That's going to be stressful. And then as we're talking, having a conversation, some things to explain that are really, really helpful is we're shooting digital video, meaning that the media is cheap. So I can record as many takes as we need to take. We can do it over and over again. If you make a mistake, just keep going. Don't worry about it. My goal is to make you look better than I look right now. And usually everybody laughs because I always don't look that great in person. And then we talk about not only making mistakes isn't an issue, but we're going to edit this later. So typically when we shoot, we have multiple cameras, and the reason we have two cameras is we can have somebody start a sentence on one camera and cut to the second angle on the second sentence, but those two sentences didn't happen at the same time, but in the edit, they're gonna look perfect. So you explain how your goal is to make them look awesome on camera no matter what. And then if they're still nervous, which does happen no matter what, you have lights set up and cameras on and people are like, this is freaking me out. And you say, okay, well, here's what we're gonna do. You and I are just gonna have a conversation. And at this time, usually I've already pre-planned this with somebody when I find out during my initial conversation that someone's gonna be hesitant on camera. So I'll kind of make a nod to my camera operator so that they start recording during a conversation, and I'll just start talking to them. So we're recording the conversation, and during that conversation between the two of us, I'm asking them the questions that I want them to respond. So they're looking across the camera anyways at me, and they're answering the questions, and I'm recording that the whole time. And I know that I can just be quiet when they're talking because that's all we're going to use. Like I'm off mic, it won't pick up my sound anyways. So those tips kind of really make a huge difference in getting a reluctant actor to kind of give you a nice delivery. And then, you know, some simple kind of like personal communication things. If that still is causing issue, you know, I get people to breathe. I lighten the mood with jokes. I talk about how this is going to be way better than they ever imagined, and people are going to be seeking their autographs. I mean, there's a lot of little things you can kind of give people to boost them along the way, because ultimately what you're in the business, if you're making video for your company or as a vendor or whomever, you're in the business of making people look fantastic, and that's your ultimate goal. I mentioned a script already and talked about how to put that together. So a shot list is sort of that natural progression that comes after it, and really it's a document that puts the video producer, the crew, and the client efficiently on the same page. It allows everybody to capture what they need, saving time and money. And the shot list really is that tool that you want to have in your hand along with the script on the day of the shoot to make sure you're getting what you need. Just a quick little notes about the 4 columns that I use. This is a simplified shot list, by the way. Of course, this is a tool that's borrowed from Hollywood. They use much more complex shot lists than this, but for business video purposes or corporate video purposes, this is the majority, or this is the most I think that you'll need. And that's number the shots. It's really surprises me sometimes how many people make a shot list and they won't number them, because then when you talk about it later, what do you refer to, like the 6th one or the 4th one? So number the shot list, and then abbreviate the name of the type of the shot and put down whether you're moving or not, and then also detail that description. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here is the shot list example from that video that I queued up for you before with Diane, our actor, walking to the center of the Ace Hardware sales floor. And you'll see that was shot number 26. Right? It was a WS, which stands for wide shot, which I'll show you an image of what that looks like in a second. It's a static move, meaning we were on a tripod. There's no camera movement whatsoever. We're not panning, we're not tilting, we're not sliding, none of that. We're just locked down on a tripod, someone press record. And then there's the description, and that came right from the script. As you can see, I have the clip there behind it, which shows, you know, the browser. It's a video shot. She enters the screen, approaches the camera, and waits. So that's it in a shot list. So here's what that looks like. So the kind of basic grammar of film that's indicated as a WS, an MS, or a CU, which is wide shot, medium shot, close up. This basic grammar of film you have all seen hundreds of times if you watch anything on Netflix or Hulu or HBO Go or network TV. If you're doing any kind of a video consumption, you have been taught the grammar of film, and that is we establish what's going on in the wide shot, we get a little closer to kind of see what's happening, and then we go into the close-up when something really important is about to happen. So we apply that same grammar of film to business video. We want to establish where we're at, so we open into the store, browser customer walks in, she stops on her spot, and now we're going to get to like, what's the next thing? What is she really doing? What do we want to approach her for? Now we're in that medium shot. She's looking at a bottle of weed killer. And then we get to the close-up. She's about to talk. She's going to say something that's really important. So that basic grammar, wide shot, medium shot, close-up is really important to indicate when you're planning out this type of video shoot. So you'll see that I use that shot list not only to indicate the listing, but also to keep track during the shoot. So I use it, that's my kind of handwriting there off to the side. So these are the number of takes it took to get that clip that you saw exactly the way we want it. So I would mark a number 1, it's take 1, which we're going to cover in screen direction in a second. And then she didn't do so good. Take 2, not the best. Take 3, that's awesome. So 3 is there by itself, not crossed out. That is communicating to my editor as also to the client who's watching it happen. This is the take we want to use. It saves us time and everybody knows exactly what's going to go into that final video. All right, moving from shot lists into lighting. So if you want to separate yourself from an amateur, then pay attention to the lighting. It's one of the 2 things. Lighting and audio are super critical on any kind of business shoot. If you want to make sure it looks like professional video in the end, light it properly and get great audio. So the pro tip here is talking about 3-point lighting. This is Diane, our actor that's playing the role of the browser customer, and you can tell if you look at the screen, she doesn't have a light on her. This is pretty dramatic. This is probably some kind of horror film. It's pretty scary. This is not something that we want to use in a business situation. Let's take a look at what the huge difference that 3-point lighting is going to have on her. And we'll start by adding the key light, which is the biggest and the brightest light. So we bring in the key. The key light, this time we're bringing it in from the right-hand side. So already Diane looks better, right? The difference though, with that single light on the side, it's more of a dramatic look, right? So this is probably going to be something more of like a romance piece, or maybe she's sharing something about some peril, right? We're not getting the message of this is a customer in a store. It's too much drama. It's not good for retail sales training. Now, in order to fix that, we're going to fill in the other side of her to sort of make her look like she belongs more in a store. And we do that with what's called the fill light. So the fill light, already we can see we've used 2 lights. We've balanced Diane's face and made it less dramatic and a little bit more flat. And this really makes her kind of pop off the background, right? However, we can still add a 3rd light, which is really going to finalize the look. We add a backlight, also referred to as a hair light, as if you notice when we add that light, look how her hair sort of gets illuminated, and even around her shoulders and her neck, we see a kind of a little bit of a glow. The other thing you notice is the background gets a little darker when we do that. So now there's a little less focus on the grills and stuff in the background, and Diane is sort of jumping off that screen right at us. And we can really focus on the fact that we're talking to Diane. We don't care so much about the stuff in the background, all because we use 3-point lighting. Of course, you can do the 2. That works just as well. I mean, if you don't have all 3 lights, you can make that work. Or like I suggested earlier, you can use the windows as a key light and add a light to fill in if you need to. The next way to separate yourself, as I mentioned, is audio. You want to make sure that video looks professional. Use good quality audio collection. So as pros, we use a shotgun mic suspended from a boom, or we use a lavalier mic, which is kind of a wireless pack that you put on the belt, and then we hide the wires underneath their shirt or on their side. You might not always have access to those if you're a DIYer, or if you're making the video for yourself, or you're hiring a company maybe that uses those things. If you don't, however, what you can make sure you do at all times is to monitor. Monitoring that audio during recording is super critical. So this is Dave. He's kind of one of our super guys here. He is our audio guy. He's got a great set of ears to listen. He's a musician, and he can tell you when there's a sound in the room, like a hum from an HVAC system, or maybe a rumble from something, or even a siren that's outside that we couldn't hear, but the professional mics are picking up. He'll stop the production or say, hey, we need to do that one again. And that is so important, because if you don't have somebody monitoring what that mic is picking up, you won't know it until you get back to the edit suite. You start playing the video like, why is there a siren in the background? We didn't have sirens. Like, because you can't hear it with your ear, but the microphones are more sensitive and they're going to pick it up. So let's take a look, if you're a DIYer, how you would accomplish some of these audio things. So I would suggest, if you're doing this yourself, or on a smaller scale of hiring a production company, you want to get a dedicated mic that'll plug into your camera. I totally recommend these 3 brands in this order: Sennheiser, Audio-Technica, and Rode. You can get really good products to work with your camera from each of them. Use headphones or earbuds to monitor the audio. And then avoid using a separate audio recorder. A lot of indie filmmakers started to use separate audio recording devices, which require you to have to sync that audio with the video. If you're making a business video, you want it all happening in the camera, and it'll just make it faster, more efficient, and cause less problems down the line. And then last but not least in this regard, I would give a recommendation to B&H Photo and Video. You can contact their customer service. You can get on the phone with them or have a chat with them, and they'll help you build an audio kit at whatever price point you're looking to enter the market in, and set you up with some really good products. They're the first place I usually go to when we need gear to take a look at something, and I've even contacted them myself to sort of help figure out what we might need for a particular situation. So a couple of things as it relates, if you're doing a DIY camera, start with using a tripod. If you're new to it, you want to try to make sure that your camera is not too shaky. It's very common for people to think, okay, I want to have kind of a handheld look so it feels more natural. If you have those skills and you're used to doing that, I'd say go for it. If you are not, I would lock it down on a tripod. In terms of power, you want to make sure that your camera is plugged in unless you have a lot of extra batteries. And typical DIYers have 1 or 2 batteries, and those might run out in 45 minutes to an hour. And then you're kind of stuck because it takes a long time to charge them. And then memory is a big deal. So knowing that you have enough cards to capture what you need to capture to plug in, that's a very cheap thing to buy. They're very affordable. Have plenty on hand so that you can back it up. Use that grammar of film that I was mentioning, that wide, medium, close-up. Make sure you try to get each of them if you can. Even if you don't end up using them in the edit, having all 3 on hand is awesome. And then after you get your shot set, I would say it's really critical to make sure it's in focus. Depending on the camera you're using, it might be an autofocus, or if not, you want to just verify before you start recording. All right, let's take a look at the next little video clip about set direction. We're going to hop into this here. So here is that exact same scene, and I'm going to show you kind of how we directed this shot, kind of moving through. We see the video is going to play, and I'm going to talk through the stuff at the bottom. We have this camera operator announcing the time code, and the director marks it down. Someone says okay, and then he says roll tape and speed, and then directs action. So now that they've directed, the actress comes out, she walks to her spot, and she misses her spot. So we cut. Director says cut. Let's go back again, move to your starting spots. You're not going to come to us. And we start again. Time code again, we write it down. Camera operator rolls the camera. Director calls action, and she gets to her spot this time, exactly where she needs to go. This was take 3, I think, that I highlighted on that script before. And he says cut. All right, perfect. Let's set up for the next one, and we're out. So this is scene direction, a good example, or I'm sorry, set direction, which shows a good example. There's a link to this at the end if you want to watch it later. And this is kind of just some best practices to kind of help you work with actors, you know, planning out those movements before rolling camera, discussing the speed of the actor's speech. If you're going to translate this, make sure this actor doesn't speak too fast. And then also make sure that only the director is going to talk to the actor. You don't want to create confusion by allowing anybody to tell the actor what to do. So here's that process, which I just went through step by step. I just put it in the deck, so you'll have it after this talk so you can see kind of a best practice on how to work with talent. So a teleprompter, this is kind of a high-end piece of gear. Not everybody has an opportunity to use this. I threw it in here so you have it at your disposal if you ever have to use a teleprompter on a shoot or thinking about using one. It's really good for longer content or people who are maybe not adept at, they're not adept at memorizing their lines, or maybe even a CEO or an executive that you need to record kind of a speech to, and they're not going to memorize. You can have a teleprompter kind of work. And key to this is you need a dedicated operator to run this, and the actor is going to set the pace, or the executive, if they're recording, they're going to set the pace, and the operator should follow along with them. All right, so we're into a lightning round here. Some storytelling tips, pro tips. So it is a fact, and there'll be links to this stuff at the end. In fact, over half the video content that's being created right now is being viewed on mobile. I think this was probably about 6 months ago that I wrote this, so it's probably way more. We're probably into 70% range maybe. So you want to plan for that pocket-sized screen. You know, you want to fill the frame with close-ups. Don't shoot a lot of wides. That you might have that wide at the beginning, but you want a lot of medium shots and close-ups. And then make sure that text is large enough. For those of you out there thinking about mobile and social video, that text should be easy to read on a 4-inch screen. Another fact, videos up to 2 minutes get the most engagement. So if it's a short video, more people are going to pay attention to it. If it's 3, 4, 5 minutes, you probably have lost them. So pro tips for that. Hook them in the first 5 seconds. Get something engaging right at the beginning. Maybe a quick montage, quick fiery shot of images like, whoa, what was that, right? Quick pace, fast edits. If you have a talking head, don't keep them there too long. Maybe they say a sentence, maybe 1 sentence, maybe 3 words. And then I would try to say, use that 3-act structure, you know, 30 seconds for each act, maybe 1:30 at the top, maybe 10 seconds per act. You know, give me a beginning, middle, and end. It's that storytelling structure that has worked since before we had video, since people just told stories out loud. Next fact, 85% of Facebook videos are watched without sound. And I think this is starting to happen on some other socials as well. So you have to plan for that. Meaning if you start talking in the first 10 to 15 seconds and that's what you want people to have on social, you're probably going to miss your message. And you want to make sure you have text that goes along with that so that text overlays, whether that's similar to what you saw in the video I had, where there are subtitles that shows what someone's saying so someone can read it, which on LinkedIn, just like and similar to Facebook, there's oftentimes people will caption everything so that people can read, because you're looking at it on your phone, you're not listening to it. Typically people are not playing that audio. You want to create intrigue similar to that flashy montage-y thing to get into the middle. And then this last one here is probably a big part of what we are doing right now, a lot of, and there's a lot more demand of it, is animation. Most people love animations, and we definitely have Disney to thank for that. But probably the number one reason I think that animations are growing in popularity is because they're a little more evergreen than using a live actor. By throwing an animation up there with text or some type of drawn image, I don't have to rely on somebody on camera that either is going to move from the company in 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, or maybe 2 years from now that's going to look a little dated because they're wearing a particular type of clothing or something that was trendy at the time, or they're in a background or a location that's completely different. So by using an animation, you give yourself the flexibility of changing that and providing a little more evergreen nature to your content. All right, so we've reached the part where I have a final poll here, which is, what video pro tips did you find the most helpful? So Sean, if you can just have a little tally there, maybe you can give me a result. I'm just kind of curious, from those of you who are with me here today, which pro tips did you find the most helpful related to which topics? This helps me kind of focus in on what people are looking for.
Sure. And while we're waiting for people to enter in their responses, Chris, about how many people should a company that's shooting these videos, how many people should they plan on having on site? It looks like there are a good number of moving parts.
So that's a good question, Sean. So I'd say depending on the type of video you're creating. So obviously I'm showing you an example from Ace Hardware, huge national company, and it's maybe not representative of everybody who's either listening in or or a small business might make a video like that. So that crew was, I think, there were 4 people from our production company on that, and then there were 2 people from Ace Hardware, so there were 6 people total for that. And that was a full-blown shoot, lots of talent, lots of actors, travel, and all that stuff involved. For the other types of productions we do here, I would say for us it's a minimum of 3 people, but that involves, you know, audio, lights, you know, setting up a microphone, getting a location. However, if you're capturing something like a testimonial, like kind of a gritty testimonial on location, almost in an ENG, like a electronic news gathering format, where the microphone's mounted to the camera pointing right at them, and you want to get it outside of an event, or maybe you have a trade show, you only need 1 person to do that, maybe 2. 1 person who's really good at handling that, because they need to be able to set everything up. But if you're actually going to go through the process of writing a script and getting things together, I'd say a minimum of 3.
Great. And we've had some people send in their thoughts on what was most helpful. So far, we've got the pre-planning tips, the shot list, a lot of the creative brief review. People also found that helpful. Awesome. And then one other person again said the pre-information and the project direction, so the script, the set details, and the shot list. So awesome. Pretty wide range there.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Sean. So for me, the next thing really is looks like we have about 3 minutes by my estimation. If there are any other questions that people have, this is a perfect opportunity to get something specific, maybe to what your needs are, to what you're working on, and to help your next production be a success.
No questions yet, but real quickly, Chris, you talked about animation. Any good services or platforms that you see a lot of people using for any animation needs that they might need?
So I don't have a platform or animation to kind of recommend, mostly because we do custom content for people, so we make that ourselves. I have dabbled in years past with a couple of those online platforms, but it's not something that we do quite a bit, so I don't have a good pulse on which one would be the best to use. There are a lot of different services out there, I think, that kind of offer different things to different people. I'm trying to think. There was one that was across from us at a trade show. They used to be called Go Animate, and now they're called something else. They're wildly successful, but I can't think of their name. Sorry about that, Sean. It's just not something that I do a lot of.
No problem, Chris. And we actually have one other question that came in. What is the range of cost that a business might be looking at?
So price-wise, so pricing a video comes down to the time it takes to make the video in terms of going out and capturing it. So is it a half day, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day shoot? Each of those days, obviously costs more. And then the time it takes in post to make it. So if you're doing a simple, let's say you want to go out and capture some testimonials, and then the edit for that is we're going to turn those testimonials into like 15, 30, 45 second, maybe 1 minute clips, real short edits, not a lot of motion graphics, no visual effects, and they're just going to be simple, what I call in and out edits, where you're just cutting a beginning and an end, maybe putting a title on it, and then you're going to send it out through Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're going to communicate that through, or LinkedIn. Those you can get a number of those made in like the $5,000 range, I would say, from a production company. Some production companies might be able to do that for you for less, if that's all you're doing. And then I'd say as the complexity goes from there, so you start to get into like paid actors and narrators and a script that you have to act something out, or perhaps you're showing a product demonstration, you start to add on from there. So the more complex it gets, maybe you get to $10,000, and you're making a script that's going to involve motion graphics. Maybe text is coming up at the same time that someone's saying something. Maybe there's some visual effects that show something that's modeled. Maybe I take that product and I make it spin in the air, even though that's not really happening. And then it grows from there, right? So the more complex it gets, the more it goes up from there, I'd say. So you go in 5, 10, 15, 20, that kind of thing. And that's a fair estimate for most production companies similar to ours. Depending on other companies around town, smaller firms, we're about 25 people strong. So we tend to hit companies like Ace Hardware and serve some small companies around Cleveland as well. But there are others that serve different markets, obviously. So.
Great, thanks, Chris. Well, we don't have any other questions that have come in.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining today on the webinar, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or comments about anything that was in here. There's a link to my email, my LinkedIn, and Twitter, as well as the link to the blog posts in all of the blogs that I've written over the past year, which have had about 54 of those over the past year plus. And then there's a link also here at the end of the deck that'll be there that has everything that was listed inside of the talk today, so that you can reference it at your leisure. And that's all for me, Sean.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris, and thanks again for sharing all of this with our attendees today. And again, I'll echo Chris's sentiment. Thank you to everyone for taking time to dial in. Your feedback is really important to us, so we're going to ask you to complete a brief survey, which is going to be sent out to you shortly. So make sure you send that back in. That helps us kind of guide our webinars going forward. This concludes our session today. Chris, thank you again, and have a great Wednesday, everybody.